Hello and welcome to BTR Summit's Quick Chat with AFL. I'm Sean Buckley, Editor-in-Chief of Broadband Technology Report. Let me explain how you can participate in today's session. First, if you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please put your questions in the questions window and our technical experts will help you out. We recommend disabling any pop-up blocking software or extensions in your browser, as these can cause issues with the webinar player. Additionally, we welcome your questions during today's event. We will answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation, but please feel free to send in your questions at any time. To do so, simply type your questions into the question window on the side of your screen and hit the Admit button. Also, please be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the BTR Summit event website within the next 24 hours. You'll be notified by email when the archive is available. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Arun Jain. Arun is the Director and Product Marketing Manager at AFL. Arun's full bio can be found by clicking on the speaker tab next to the video. Thanks for joining me today, Arun.
Well,
Right. Let's get started here. Let's ask, what is your understanding of some of the service provider goals for fiber tests during the broadband over PON HFC or fiber to the A installation, activation, or troubleshooting?
well, starting with the obvious, the testing needs to be accurate and reliable. But with that said, reducing testing time remains a key goal in all phases of testing: installation, activation, and troubleshooting. This means test instruments that are fast and tests that can be performed by one technician rather than two. Another important one is to overcome the shortage of skilled workforce. In bringing on new technicians during this period of extraordinary growth and dealing with technician churn, it is critical that test instruments are easy to use and can be deployed with minimal training. Testing cost is always important, and in order to equip large workforces, which these service providers tend to have, they need inexpensive tools that are optimized for their testing needs. And lastly, another emerging goal in this day and age is that of improving subscriber experience. How do you make fiber testing less disruptive for customers during times of activation and troubleshooting? So those are some of the high-level things that I can think of.
Great. Well, let's dig a little deeper. What methods are commonly used for these fiber tests? We could walk through that.
Sure. So the traditional test method is to verify continuity and measure insertion loss for fiber segments using a combination of an optical light source and an optical power meter. The fiber segment we're talking about could be fiber to the premise, fiber distribution, a drop cable, a fiber feeder, or distribution cable, as in an HFC environment, fiber to the antenna, that a fiber that runs between a ground distribution unit to the antenna radio unit of a cell tower, or any other fiber segment. Insertion loss measurements provide the best determination of performance for fiber under test. Another common method is to measure attenuation loss over the fiber segment using an OTDR. Although not as accurate as an insertion loss measurement, OTDRs do provide a reliable determination of fiber performance. Those are the two sort of common test methods used today.
Great. That's a great summary. Let's ask, how well do they address the service provider goals? You just walked through a couple interesting scenarios there, but yeah.
Well, as you might expect, all methods have their pros and cons. So the benefits of using an optical light source and an optical power meter include: the test is very fast and accurate. It is relatively a simple test that does not require high levels of training. And the test instruments by themselves, the optical power meters and the optical light sources, are relatively inexpensive tools. However, testing with optical light source and optical power meters has some downsides. Most of them stem from the fact that it is a two-sided test. You require a technician at each end of the fiber under test, adding to labor costs. It requires a testing instrument at each end, again, leading to higher costs. And although optical power meter and optical light sources are simple tools, to make accurate insertion loss measurements, the optical power meter must be referenced to source output power at each wavelength, requiring some extra work. But the most important downside in this method is that it requires the coordination of arranging two technicians at the two ends working at the same time. So for this reason, single-ended testing using an OTDR is now preferred by many operators. Some benefits of OTDR testing, as you might imagine, the entire testing can be performed from one end. No operator or equipment is required at the other end. One operator has the benefit of using one operator, reduces labor costs. It also eliminates the need for referencing between tools and the coordination between two technicians. And OTDRs are sophisticated test tools which can do other things as well, such as identify and locate network splices and connectors, find faults such as poor splices, dirty or damaged connectors, macro bends, or fiber breaks. But as with any other testing methodology, OTDRs are also not perfect for all types of testing. Some drawbacks of OTDR testing include, firstly, OTDRs are sophisticated tools that require considerable training to operate. Not all technicians are trained for it. In many service providers, not all technicians are allowed to use an OTDR. And attenuation loss testing that OTDR uses is not as accurate as insertion loss testing using an optical light source and an optical power meter. Further, an OTDR test takes more time to complete than an insertion loss test using a light source and a power meter. With OTDR, another one, and this comes about in special cases, with an OTDR testing, sometimes the technician cannot be 100% sure that they are testing all the way to the end of the fiber. For example, there might actually be a break in the fiber under test, and the OTDR would only test to the break. If the break is near the far end of the fiber segment, the technician may assume that they have reached the end of the fiber where they have only reached the break. So in certain cases, it could be less accurate. And lastly, OTDRs are expensive tools. Service providers can only equip a limited number of technicians with an OTDR. So they do add benefits, that of being single-ended operations, but there are some costs and shortcomings that come with an OTDR test. So we think there is a need for a new type of testing approach that sort of combines the simplicity and reliability of an optical light source and a power meter with the convenience of a single-ended operation of an OTDR.
Interesting. Some interesting insights there. Let's ask, are there alternative methods to better achieve these service provider goals? You kind of touched upon that a little bit. Dig a little bit deeper. Yeah.
Yes. So again, for reasons of convenience, labor costs, and coordination of multiple technicians, single-ended tests are preferred over two-ended ones. Although not widespread, there are a couple of alternative schemes used for testing. One such solution is the Remote Fiber Test System, RFTS as it's called, that combines OTDR technology with optical reflectors on the far end to verify continuity to the end of the fiber under test and to measure insertion loss. These systems are normally designed to work with 1650 nanometer wavelength reflectors, which means that the reflectors will need to be removed from the fiber after insertion loss testing is done in order to perform OTDR 1650 nanometer tests. For example, event loss measurements on the fiber. If the reflector is not removed, the 1650 nanometer loss measurement test will not be accurate. The systems offer no flexibility in where equipment is deployed, as they require a controlled environment for operation. This is a very elaborate system, and it has to be deployed at a corporate level and generally operates out of a central office or a head end. And all testing has to be done from there. It does not support isolated segment testing like field testing, for example, FTTP drops or FTTA fiber cable testing. For this reason, they are niche solutions, perhaps applicable for only the largest of the service providers. One other option is, and it applies only for PON applications, is to use the light source capability of the OLTs and use a power meter at the subscriber premise to measure the downstream signal from the OLT. By eliminating a technician and an optical light source at one end, it offers some benefits of a single-ended test. But this approach still requires a technician to visit the subscriber premise, presenting all the downsides and challenges and cost of a truck roll. And one other last detail here is the fiber must have a live signal from the OLT to determine performance. So this is the other one that is sometimes used in the industry.
Right. Finally, are there solutions available in the market today optimized for this method, as you talked about?
So implementations are underway to develop and look at and develop a new approach using a simple and inexpensive tool such as the optical light source and the power meter with the convenience of a single-ended operation like the OTDR. So in this approach, compared to an optical power meter and optical light source combination, it provides the flexibility to test fiber segments or end-to-end networks by a single technician from one end. As you might expect, this saves the labor costs for the second technician and eliminates the need for coordination between two technicians. It is simpler and even less expensive than traditional optical light source and optical power meter testing. And also, using the optical light source and optical power meter is not a particular difficult test. It's quite a simple test. But this new approach makes the process even easier by eliminating the need to reference the power meter to the optical light source and calibrating the optical power meter to the optical light source signal. Also, comparing to an OTDR, which today is sort of the de facto one-sided test, it costs significantly less than an OTDR. But even more importantly, it is significantly easier to use than an OTDR. No special training is required to operate it. It's almost instantaneous operation. It's much faster than an OTDR. It requires little to no setup and instantly performs the test. This significantly reduces test time when multiple fiber segments must be tested. And lastly, it also leverages the high reliability of an insertion loss measurement rather than based on attenuation. So AFL is working and developing a solution using this approach. In our patent pending approach, it'll combine the use of a single-ended tester with a reflector on the far end.
Hmm.
And with the reflector installed, continuity and insertion loss testing can be performed from just one end.
Hmm.
No technician is required at the far end. And it operates on a wavelength that does not conflict with any operations of any other types of testers or devices. And once installed, the reflector does not have to be removed. So I was thinking maybe I can take a few minutes and explain how this would help in some of the key service provider applications.
That'd be great. Sure.
So starting with fiber to the home or fiber to the premise, this approach could be very interesting. It reduces a two-ended operation to a single-ended operation. So no technician has to visit a customer site. Eliminating a truck roll to a customer site is a major cost saving. It also eliminates the hassle of coordinating work of two technicians. This minimizes also the need to schedule a subscriber premise visit and arrange access or send technicians into a location that may be unsafe. I've heard instances where a service provider dispatches technicians in pairs to locations considered unsafe, also driving up costs. It also reduces the cost of the test instrument at customer site, and it simplifies the entire testing process. And some service providers are starting to think of what we call self-installs. Means the customers will be able to buy some equipment and install their end equipment without the help of a technician, coming to the site. This approach allows a service provider to verify continuity and insertion loss before a customer proceeds through a self-install. And several service providers are finding this very interesting.
Right.
Another application, interesting application, is fiber to the antenna. So today, testing for fiber to the antenna applications always requires a tower climb by a technician. If you use an optical light source and optical power meter, that by definition is a two-sided test. It requires the technician to climb the cell tower. Obviously, it results in labor costs and safety concerns. With this new approach, a reflector is permanently installed at the radio unit location at the time of construction. This reflector is transparent to most functions in the fiber networks. Only with the tester that we're talking about, we can then test continuity and insertion loss from just one end without having to climb towers. Even if you use OTDR, which are traditionally one-ended devices, to use an OTDR in a cell environment, it requires a loopback connector to be placed at the radio unit location on the tower. And this then has to be removed after the testing is complete. So again, it involves labor costs, and the repeated tower climbs impact the safety of the technician. And with an OTDR, as always, it is a complicated device, and you have to have special training to be able to use it. One last example that comes to mind is, as you know, service providers are now using contractors or outside parties to do a lot of their construction work. It's quite common. So in this approach, they ask their contractors to install one of our reflectors at each drop site. So for most normal function, it is a transparent reflector, doesn't show up. But using this tester, these service providers can then test this network at their convenience without needing a technician or equipment at the far end, without needing to send somebody to customer premise. It allows them to verify contractors' work from a central office or a head site without needing anything on the far end. We think this could be a very interesting application for this. So to summarize, although in early stages, this new approach has the potential to simplify testing, reduce equipment and technician costs, minimize testing time, increase technician safety, and just enhance the overall subscriber experience. Again, it is in early stages, but a lot of service providers are starting to look at it and finding use cases for it.
Right. A lot of great insights into driving efficiency and at the end of the day, making the subscribers happy. Some really great insights here. Thank you. Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time. For those questions we didn't have time to answer, we'll be getting back to you via email. Again, I want to thank Arun again for his time today. And just a reminder that today's session will be available here within the BTR Summit platform for the next 30 days. On behalf of the BTR Summit and our sponsor AFL, we would like to thank you for joining us today. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you.